Welcome to the Unknown Chronicles, where the veil between reality and the mysterious is razor thin. Together we'll journey into the darkest recesses of the human experience, where truth twists into terror and shadows whisper secrets. Prepare yourself to face the unexplained, the unsettling, and the unspeakable. The unknown is waiting. Let's step into the darkness. Today we have our next story, coming from Paul of Illinois, read by your host, Thorne Bloodrose. This story is called The Room Behind the Door. When we first moved into the big Victorian house, I was 10 years old. Mom said it was a fresh start for all of us. The house was beautiful, with creaky wooden floors, stained glass windows, and a staircase that twisted up like a corkscrew. I loved it. At least I thought I did. The basement was the only part of the house that felt off. It smelled damp and the shadows seemed to cling to the corners, even when Dad installed brighter bulbs. On our first tour, the basement was just a big empty space with an old workbench. But 2 weeks after moving in, I found a door. It was a narrow iron thing tucked behind the furnace, with rusted hinges and no knob. I swear it wasn't there before. I called for Mom when she came down. She just laughed nervously and said it must have been hidden by the furnace all along. Dad tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. He promised to deal with it later and went back upstairs. That night, I dreamt about the door. I dreamt it creaked open and something dark whispered my name. 2 weeks later, we heard a loud bang in the basement. Mom thought it was a raccoon or a pipe bursting. When Dad went to check, he found the door wide open. It led to a small room. Inside we found things. Old clothes, broken toys, the dusty picture frames. Some of the photos showed people standing outside our house. The pictures were black and white and the people looked strange. It must have been the previous owners, Dad said, but his voice was shaky. I started hearing things that night. Scratching sounds, faint whispers that seemed to come from underneath the floorboard. I told Mom, but she said it was just the house settling. I wanted to believe her, but every time I went into the basement, the room behind the door felt bigger. At first it was the size of a closet and then the size of my bedroom. And the things inside were changing. By the time I was 12, the room had grown to a full hallway. There were shelves filled with old books, jars of murky liquids and broken clocks. But the scariest part was some of the items were ours. Mom's scarf, Dad's toolbox, my favorite stuffed bear, which had gone missing months ago. I tried to tell my parents, but they just got mad. "Stop making up stories," Dad yelled. "This house is perfect for us." I didn't go back down there anymore, but the door kept creeping into my dreams. When I was 15, my sister disappeared. Ellie was only 6. Mom thought she'd run off to the woods behind the house, but I knew better. I told them to check the basement, but they wouldn't listen. When I snuck down there myself, the door was wide open, the room behind it stretching into an endless black void. I found Ellie's doll at the edge of the darkness, its head cracked open. That was the first time I saw them, the figures in the dark. Tall, shadowy things with 2 long limbs and empty eyes. They didn't move, but I could feel them watching me. I ran upstairs and locked the basement door, but I knew it wouldn't keep them out. By 18, the house was falling apart. Mom and Dad barely talked anymore. They spent most of the time staring out windows like they were waiting for something. The basement door wouldn't stay closed. Each night, I would hear it creak open, and the whispers grew louder. That was when I decided to end it all. I waited until midnight and grabbed a crowbar from the garage. I was going to destroy that room and burn whatever was inside. But when I opened the basement door, it seemed different. The walls were cold, the air smelled like dirt, and a putrid stench permeated the space. The door to the room was wide open, always wide open, and the void stretched further than I'd ever seen. Inside I saw something that stopped me cold. A table covered in photos of me, baby pictures, old portraits, my face staring back at me from every angle, and at the center of the table was my journal, the one I kept hidden under my mattress. Something moved in the dark. A long skeleton hand reached out, its fingers curling around the edge of the table. I turned to run, but the basement stairs were gone. I released this shaky breath and looked around the room. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, faded with time. My feet sank into the dust as I took a hesitant step forward, each one echoing in the silence like a countdown. The photos had multiplied, filling the walls now, not just the table. The faces in the frames were familiar. My parents, my sister Ellie, even the neighbors we'd once known. But there were others too, people I didn't recognize standing in front of the house. Some smiling, some with vacant eyes. They were all staring at me, all waiting for me to understand something I hadn't yet grasped. As I moved deeper into the room, the temperature dropped further. My breath came out in white clouds and the whispers. Once a faint sound were a constant, a low hum that seemed to vibrate in the walls and in my skull. The voices were indistinct, a jumble of syllables that twisted in the air, but every so often I would hear my name. The way they said it was wrong, not my voice, not my family's. It was something older, something deeper. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the photos. They were all from different years, but there was one common thread. Each of the people in them had stayed in the house, lived their lives, and then disappeared. Some vanished in the dead of night, some left behind strange, unfinished things, unfinished books, paintings half-finished, clocks that ticked without a hand. But they were all gone. Each person was a thread in the tapestry of the house's dark history, and now I was part of it too. I approached the table, my journal laid open in the center. The pages were turned to a blank section with only a few words scrawled in a frantic hand. I stepped closer, but I already knew what it would say before I read it. You can't escape. The house always wins. It needs you to stay. The words blurred as my vision swam, but I reached out to touch the pages anyway. The moment my fingers brushed the paper, a sharp pain shot through my chest. I stumbled back, gasping for air, my heart pounding like it was going to burst. And then the shadows in the room seemed to shift, forming shapes. The tall, gaunt figures that I had seen as a child began to manifest. They moved towards me, slow and deliberate. Their limbs were impossibly long, twisted at odd angles, their faces blank, but their eyes hollow. They were watching me, their gaze like a weight pressing on my chest. I could feel their hunger. It wasn't just for me. It was for all of us, for everyone who had ever stepped foot in this house. A voice broke through the chaos. It was soft, almost a whisper, but it was unmistakably my mother's. You have to stop. You're not meant to see this. We never meant for you to see it. I spun around. She was standing in the doorway, her face pale and drawn, her eyes haunted in a way that mirrored my own. She was holding something in her hand, an old, weathered book, its pages yellowed with age. She stepped into the room, her movement slow, as though the air itself was pulling her in. You can't escape it, she whispered, her voice barely audible. This house, it chose us, and now it wants you too. I took a step back, my pulse racing. What do you mean? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me? She glanced at the table, at the journal, and the photos. I thought you would be safe, just like we all thought we would be. Her voice cracked. But the house, it never lets go, it never lets you leave. I felt the room closing in on me, the shadows shifting closer, their cold breath like 1,000 hands reaching for me. My mind spun trying to grasp what was happening, but the more I tried to understand, the more it slipped away. I felt the weight of everything that had happened, everything that I had seen. The missing people, the things that vanished, the endless cycle that repeated itself with each new family. And then I realized the house wasn't just keeping us. It was feeding on us. It had always been, waiting for the right people, the right moment, the right family. And we were just another part of its endless hunger. We had all been a part of it. The people in the photos, the ones who came before us, and now us. I can't stay here, I whispered. My voice trembled with fear, but I had no choice. My mother stepped forward, her face filled with sorrow. You don't have a choice, none of us do. But something inside me snapped, something deep and primal. I couldn't let this happen. Not to me, not to my family. I had to break free. I turned and ran, crashing through the room, knocking over the photos, the old furnitures. The figures reached for me, their hands like skeletal claws, but I was faster. I bolted for the basement stairs that had magically returned and raced up them to the door. But as my hand gripped the cold, rusted handle, the door wouldn't open. I slammed against it, desperate, gasping for a breath. And then I heard it. The voice. My own voice calling out to me from inside the house. The walls, the floors, they were alive, resonating with the sound of my voice. The whispers had turned into a scream, deafening in its intensity. You can never leave. I turned my eyes wide with panic, but it was too late. The darkness had swallowed me whole, and in the distance, I could hear the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open. So, dear listeners, before you slip beneath the covers and let the darkness settle around you, remember the tale you heard tonight. The house with the door that should have never been opened is out there, waiting for someone who doesn't know the dangers of its embrace. The whispering shadows, the endless rooms, and the things that twist in the dark are always closer than they appear. It's not just a story, it's a warning. A reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things isn't the darkness itself, but what the darkness keeps hidden. And sometimes the only way to escape is to never let yourself walk too close to the edge of the unknown. Who knows what might be lurking just behind the veil, or what might be waiting for you in that room behind the door. This has been Thorne Bloodrose, your guide through tonight's descent into darkness. Join me next time as we uncover yet another chilling tale from the depths of the Unknown Chronicles. Until then, keep your eyes open and your wits sharp, for the shadows are always closer than you think. And remember, there are doors that shouldn't be open, places that shouldn't be explored, and secrets that should never be uncovered. The universe is vast, and there are mysteries that might not want to be solved. So be wary, be careful, and most of all, be watchful. Good nightmares, and sleep tight, if you can.